So we'll be working on this motif that's very ocean. So I'm going to do my woodland set here. You can mix up your own colors out of your set, but of course I'm using sandy type colors. So I'm going to just come in here and kind of get my first layer on my starfish and kind of cover that in, leaving a little bit of the white of the paper in there, and then I've got a little bit of this brown here. I can start kind of while it's wet, sort of tapping in some areas that would be a shadow. And I wanted to sort of blur a little bit like you're seeing, and then I will want some detail later when I come back in. And kind of following that along the ridge here. And then over here, it just kind of went all over the place. So I'm just going to take the paper towel and get rid of that. And I'm going to add a little bit of this kind of turquoisey blue color in here. Because with the sort of yellowy sand color, it's going to look a little bit green. And that way, it sort of looks like it's been underneath that sand and getting that sort of ocean-esque moss look to it, but that's while it's wet. And I think I want to add a little bit, this is roxbury with a lot of water, I think I want to add a little bit of that sort of pinky color, because I'll be doing that shell, that and that color, and it will start to blend in a little bit. If you don't like that, that's fine too. It's a personal preference and how you want to do it. You can even do these in a gray versus a sand color, or make it more white if you want. Now, I've lost a little bit of my brown that I kind of added in here. It's sort of gone all over the place, so I'm just going to add a little bit of that again, and then I'll come back in with those details. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is work on this shell, which I'm going to use more of this kind of pink color. And because it's so small, I'm not trying to go in between every line, but I am conscious of the lines and trying to sort of, instead of just going all the way across, which you're welcome to do, I'm just blotting some of that color in there and going to kind of leave a little room where I might add a detail along the top between these two sections. So this has had a chance to dry, so I want to show you how some of this dried. You know, I added that green in here and it really dissipated and left these mineral, my brush is dirty, left these mineral deposits in a few places, and that's how you get those nice little lines. So I had my original layer, I added in more, the brown in this case went all the way to the edge, and it made those nice little lines in there. Okay, so I'm going to continue working on this seashell here, and I'm going to, this really doesn't have its own formal line. You can add one if you want to with a pencil. And I'm going to go in and sort of add a darker line here along the edge of this shell. And I'll put, it's a very similar color, so I'm going to go in here and add that. Kind of run out of these pinks, so I'll make a few new colors. And I'll go in and kind of put some definition in these areas here. It's kind of rusty color. And this brown I'm going to add. See how I'm not putting it on every single space of that shell. And now I'll add that to the edges here. So we've got the form of our shell. And now we'll work on this. Yes, they're all shells here until we get into the ocean. So we're going to put that layer, the top layer like we did over here, we're going to put that into this shell here. And I'm leaving a little bit of white of the paper along here so that it can have a little bit of highlight, and I want to come in here and do some darker pigment along the bottom as a shadowed area, and do the same thing for a few of these places where there's some delineation between each of the folds of this particular shell. And I don't want it to look like a solid borderline, so I'm pulling some of that pigment across just to kind of give it a more natural look. So that's the basics there. And I'll leave that to dry. This is now ready, and I kind of lost my rust color here, so I'll make sure to get that going. Maybe I don't want it as rusty on my starfish. And I'm not putting it on every single exact circle, although you're welcome to do that. And a little bit of shadow that can kind of come in along here to delineate the lines. I don't want to go all the way around. Just kind of adding those in, especially where you see the lines that I've drawn in here. If it's too strong of a line, you can always clear your brush and sort of blend that in a little bit. And I'll get this little guy here, give him some format. And I'll take a little bit, just a basic sand color, sort of fill that in for now, and I can go back in and add a little more detail in a bit. So now I'm going to come back over here to this shell and add a few lines, dots for this color here. And I'm letting the drawing sort of work for me. And you can make it more brown or more pink, whatever you like. And it's fun if you do the same exact motif, but then change up the color. Now, I don't like how I went out of the line there. I will be going over this area later, so it probably really won't matter. Pull that back a little bit, and I'd like to kind of get some of that pinky color in here. Let the dissipate a bit. So I'm going to now put this sort of sandy wash in the background here. Squeezing my water brush, I can do clear around some of these places, staying in this one little area. And now kind of drop some pigment in there. It's too much, so I'll move that around. Now in my example drawing, I actually did take a little bit of this and actually put it's water and sand, so they kind of intermix here. And because that sand has a little bit of yellow in it, it can turn a little green. So I'm trying to keep them a little bit away from each other. See how it's turning a little bit green there? All right, now in my example, that's a lot of pigment I loaded in there, and it wasn't wet, so it didn't disperse, so I'm just pulling some away into my towel. And that has more pinks over here, so I'm going to copy that. And now I'm going to go around here and work on some water. So I'm going to put, and don't use too much or your paper will buckle because we haven't taped it down and sized it. So if you're okay, don't put too much water. It buckles a little bit. You can still put it in a frame and that's fine. And you don't have to fill the whole thing in, but I'm going to use this kind of mist and sort of just drop this in. And like my example, I still have a little bit of sand. It's all underwater, so blue on that. Going kind of quick for the sake of this video. Now I have these little kind of bubbles here. You can either make them blue like they're underwater, or you can have them be a sand color as if they're little shells. And I'm going to add a little pink. I'm going to put that in each one. And before, I'm going to use a little bit of green. We'll see how that dries, and then we'll come back if we need to. And now we're going to work on our sky. So I'm going to just got this fat brush, which I could have used down here. It's a little bit wider, still has a little tip. I do sell these in my shop and online. So I'm going to do something a little more blue and see how I'm going side to side, because that's how the horizon goes. And I'm not swirling it around like I did below. Making a pretty simple sky. You could always put clouds and things in here, but I think a nice subtle sky looks beautiful. And in my example, I used a darker blue as the shadow here. You could use a brown from the sand color if you wanted to. Just gonna blend that out a little bit so it's not quite as stark. Now we've got the same thing going on over here. And I'll kind of get rid of that little pigment line there. So, you can always add more detail, but that's the basic gist of it. I'll just kind of come in here and just sort of outline some of that sand bar here. Like so.